You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hey everybody, welcome to TV Guidance Counselor. I am Ken Reed, as always your TV Guidance Counselor, and this is the podcast in which I, Ken Reed, your TV Guidance Counselor, the on hiatus through no fault of his own stand-up comedian, guides you through our collective viewing choices of our collective past via back issues of TV Guide magazine from my personal collection. And this week is no exception to that concept. Some weeks are, because it's my show. I talk about whatever the hell I want. You back off. And my guest is David Rees, and David is the co-creator and co-star of Dicktown, with good friend of the show, good personal friend, John Hodgman, as well as Obehi Janice is on that show, which I must point out. John heard her because she was on this show and then had her on Dicktown, which is amazing. And she's great and is well-deserved. And I feel very proud to have a very small part in that. Anyway, David's on that show. He's done a ton of stuff. If you don't know his work already, you should get familiar with it. He's a cartoonist. He's an author. He hosted a show on, I think it was Discovery. I should probably look that up. He currently has a podcast called Election Profit Makers, which is a must check out. I'll put up links on tvguidancecounselor.com and all the social media and all that stuff there. You should definitely check him out. In addition, he is just David_Rees, Rees, on Twitter, and he has links to all his stuff there as well. Rees, Rees, which is 50% of my last name. I'm rambling, as I am wont to do. Anyway, this week is a fun one, so I think you'll enjoy it. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, David Rees.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Live via satellite from Los Angeles? Are you on the West Coast?
Los Angeles, TV City.
TV City, Los Angeles. David Rees, how are you, sir?
Thanks for having me. Hello.
You're welcome. Thank you for doing this. And this is interesting. So you and I are of similar age, but the issue you picked, I think, is from before you were born.
Yes. The issue I picked is 3 years before I was born. 3 years and let's see. I was born in June of 1972, and I picked an issue from July of 1969. So almost 3 years exactly.
So this is July 19th to the 25th, and this is not just a random week in 1969. This is
indeed.
Historic.
No.
For,
Do you know why I
for
picked
one
this
very
week?
specific reason.
Could you figure it out?
I don't know. I think I'll give my listeners credit that they figure it out, but some people may not. And of course, the historic thing is that this is the TV guide in which there is a big article in here about the prisoner.
Right. This has the greatest episode of Hogan's Heroes ever. So I thought for posterity's sake, we should study this historic issue of TV Guide.
There is a weird article in here. I don't know if you looked at any of the articles, but Walter Cronkite wrote an article about Jules Verne.
I was I haven't looked at TV Guide in a long time. I have to say, reading through this PDF of the scan that you sent me, it's like, this is a pretty impressive publication.
Yeah. Oh, the writing
interesting
was
articles. It has the listings. I really love the language of the television listings, the visual chaos of trying to make sense of it's been so long since I've looked at the listings where you have some channels are in black and some channels are in white. And I was having this rush of nostalgia from looking at TV guides. I guess I would have looked at them in the 80s. I don't think we were ever subscribers in my home, but I'm sure I leafed through them hungrily at my friends' houses. My friends who were lucky enough to subscribe to TV Guide. Like, it's a pretty cool magazine.
It is. The writing is great. They had, I always say Eleanor Roosevelt wrote for it. Harlan Ellison wrote for it. Like, it was just a crazy amount of people. And it's sort of, but it's not like stuffy and heady, but it's also not like what we're used to now, which is all like gossip and press releases.
Yeah.
There's like some critique in here. It does also, and I'm a little bit biased as a big fan of TV Guide, but it does also have an air of independence to me. It doesn't seem like they will criticize stuff. Like they don't seem as scared of like, oh, we don't want to piss off the network. Then they won't give us exclusives.
Right. This is probably, well, I don't know anything, but I would assume that celebrity publicists did not yet have a stranglehold on entertainment journalism. It does have a sort of independent character to it,
although not independent from cigarette companies, as we can see.
I mean, the ads are another, just the ads are just glorious.
There's one in the back cover here, because the way I scan it, you can see the back and front at the same time, but it's this kind of sexy mod girl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess she's crawling, sort of.
Well, she's either crawling or she's collapsed because she just smoked.
She can't breathe.
She got caught smoking. Her dad made her smoke the whole pack. And she fell over in her mini skirt.
But looks sexy doing it. It's a sexy collapse. And then weirdly, the tagline just says, "You better believe it. U.S. government figures show Pall Mall Gold 100s now lower in," and in quotes, "tar."
They put the tar in scare quotes.
The best-selling filter king. And like nothing in this ad manages to stitch together.
No.
It's just like 5 incongruous elements thrown on a page.
This is like, I forced my AI to look at 5,000 cigarette ads from the late 60s and generate one of its own. Like it has tar and scare quotes. It has Pall Mall brand cigarettes. It has a woman in a mini skirt on the ground. And then it has a random phrase. You better believe it.
You better believe it. I also like how that catchphrase really could be used to sell anything.
Yeah, totally.
It's just a catch-all catchphrase. So you grew up sort of in the D.C. area, right?
I grew up in North Carolina. I grew up in Chapel Hill.
Okay, Chapel Hill. Okay.
We took annual trips to D.C., but I didn't live in D.C.
Okay, so I have been to North Carolina, been to Chapel Hill, enjoyed the barbecue. Saw a lot of dead dogs. Weirdly. I don't know if that's a thing. Yeah, it was weird.
You had a museum or something?
Yeah, I was at the Dead Dog Museum. No, it like driving down for some reason it was like cigarette store, church, porn store, and then like dogs all on the side of the road.
Ooh,
I don't know if that's a thing.
I don't associate my home state with dead dogs, but maybe there's been a rebrand since I lived there. Maybe
why does it say that on the license plates?
Right, exactly. First in dead dog. First in flight, second in dead dogs.
Second in dead dogs. It might have just been me. It might have been that summer. Did you have siblings?
I have a younger brother. Yep. 5 years younger.
Were you kind of making all the TV decisions?
You know, looking through this TV guide and seeing some old familiar faces and some old titles, I did get nostalgic for, like, let's see, somewhere in here there was an episode, I think, of Bonanza. And Bonanza was in syndication when my brother and I were young, and that was a must-watch in late mornings whenever we had a snow day or a sick day or a holiday. We loved to watch Bonanza.
Were you Western fans in general?
I don't think so. I think in Bonanza, there was just a pleasant family. They just all seemed like good guys, and it was exciting, and we liked the map. Doesn't the map get a hole burnt through it in the opening?
Oh yeah,
sequence?
with the whip. It's like
yeah, it's pretty dramatic. And we also liked Wild Wild West, which was, I don't know if that is a Western or like a sci-fi. I feel like there was a lot of gadgetry and it was kind of like spy Western stuff.
Yeah, anyway, Wild Wild West was like all the 60s fads except for monsters in one show. So it was like spies, Western, sci-fi, all in one thing. And it's such a cool idea, which is why that Wild Wild West movie is so horrifically disappointing.
Right. I mean, it feels like if you try to do a big budget at it, it just feels like one of those things that can't work once it gets above its raisin, as they say down south. Like if you have too much money to throw at it, you're going to lose some of the cheekiness of it, I guess.
Yeah. I think that is a thing that if you don't have rules or you don't have constrictions, you kind of aren't incentivized to come up with something interesting. Yeah,
that's true. Free, creative freedom is a great excuse to not exercise any ingenuity.
All freedom, no creative.
Right. Yeah.
Were you a big detective show fan and stuff? Because they're like obviously Dicktown.
Well, I was a fan of the Encyclopedia Brown books, as was my creative partner, John Hodgman. That was obviously a huge inspiration for Dicktown because it's about a former child detective who's now an adult solving mysteries for kids. Mystery shows. I don't know. Name some mystery shows. I don't remember that being a huge genre in my childhood.
In the 80s, there weren't a ton. You had sort of holdovers. So you had like Columbo and, Murder, She Wrote. The 70s, you had like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys.
The mystery show I remember is The Bloodhound Gang, which was a recurring segment on 321 Contact. Those were also kids who solved mysteries.
If you got the crime, we got the time. We're the Bloodhound Gang.
It had a great theme song.
It always weirded me out that one of the main Bloodhound Gang members was also one of the Warriors.
Oh, that's right. Yep. Yeah. I mean, working actors, right?
I like to think that's the same character.
In the extended Bloodhound Gang universe?
Yes, absolutely. So are you a big space fan? Like you're...
Not really. I mean, well, do you mean as a genre of pop culture or as a thing to think about scientifically?
I guess this is a thing to think about scientifically, given this issue being this is the moon landing issue.
Okay. So the reason I picked this issue was I wanted to see how TV Guide covered the moon landing. This is the week of the Apollo 11 mission touching down on the moon, and obviously the associated television spectaculars. I think we can agree this is probably the greatest television event in human history.
Yeah.
Live broadcast from the surface of the moon. No live production of The Wiz or no Super Bowl will ever come close to turning on your TV and watching a human being walk around on the moon for the first time ever. I just had to, I wanted, and I was like, well, this magazine is all about TV. Let's see how they covered the biggest TV event ever. It was probably a great night for television. It's the cover of the magazine, and the whole issue is suffused with these wonderful things like, if all goes well, presumably networks will cut away from this to show us people on the moon, all that type of stuff. It has the Walter Cronkite essay. It's just like, I can't believe the cigarette ads weren't Apollo 11 moon mission themed. Like they should, you know what I mean? Like there's no brand tie-in as far as I can tell. They
really missed a trick with that. And I think that's the one mistake they made here, but everything else, because unlike all other major real life events that I can think of that were covered by television, they all tend to be reactive. They're not planned. They're like disasters.
Exactly.
This is the only one, to your point, I can think of that we knew was going to happen.
Yeah. And I also think that observation is kind of central to the history of the Apollo 11 mission. Like it was a PR, has obviously had a lot of valid scientific inquiry driving it, but it was a very deliberate Cold War PR coup, announced by President Kennedy. And the whole point was, they probably had a conversation where they're like, well, listen, fellas, we're not going to the moon unless we can get a TV camera up there and show everybody this American flag on the moon, right? Like the whole point is that the whole world, especially the Soviets, see us on the moon. So it was very meticulously planned, and a huge part of that meticulous planning was the public presentation of this feat. So I think you're right. Unlike a lot of breaking news or television events from this era, the moon landing was one that was both A, good news because it went well, fortunately, and two, pre-planned and very probably deliberately choreographed, Yeah.
And it one thing I want to mention, my favorite thing about Kennedy's speech about the moon is the line he says after "we'll go to the moon." And I know it's a reference to earlier in the speech, but out of context, it sounds amazing where he goes, "We will go to the moon and do that other thing."
Oh, really?
Yeah. Cause it's like, do the other thing that we've whatever, but it just sounds like he's just being mysterious for no apparent reason.
He's just riffing.
Yeah.
Like, here's what we're going to do, man. Oh, we're going to go to the moon. And then there was one other thing. Oh, what was it?
We're going to do that other thing. It's
just
teach
a shark to read.
It's always the part where whenever you hear like someone does like a montage of history, as we see all the time, and they play that clip, they never just play the "we will go to the moon" because it's like almost too short. So they always play the "do the other thing," but that's like when they fade it out.
That's good. They can, yeah.
You always
a little
hear it.
extra audio tail to play with.
My favorite thing seeing here is seeing what was counter programming the moon landing.
Well, right. That was the other thing I wanted to see, right? We all know what the big show this week is, right? It's when they literally walk on the moon. But those so TV Guide obviously acknowledges that and says when it's going to be happening, but it's like, it's in the context of other television shows. It's so funny because it's like, yeah. And also there's Hogan's Heroes. If the moon landing isn't what you're interested in, you can watch the Nazi death camp comedy, right? Like the world, man is on moon but the world spins onward, like maybe it's not for everybody.
The best possible counter programming. Like, I guess this is what would be the opposite of the moon landing. Miss Universe.
Right. It was a very Galaxy Brain issue of TV Guide.
Bob Barker.
Because you have a man you're deciding which man conquers the moon. And at the same time, you're deciding which woman will be queen of the universe.
Yes.
It was a heady time, 1969.
And if those things go well, maybe 1970, we can send Miss Universe to the moon.
Right.
Never happened.
Yep.
That's what we need to bring the world together. I do want to say that Martha Vasconcelos, I think is her name, who was the Miss Universe 1968, has some incredible hair. Like it is.
I'm looking at that page now.
It is.
It's of its era. It's
gravity defying.
So let's see. This was, what night was the Miss Universe broadcast? Because
On
the moon was Sunday, right? It was.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, it says. It does have a little blurb at the bottom of the Saturday night page saying if the mission is on schedule, the astronauts will land on the moon Sunday and walk on the surface of the moon, and the networks have planned saturation coverage for 31 hours.
It's interesting. I wonder if this was actually one of the first times saturation coverage was planned by I mean, this gets back to your point about it being a historic televised event that was very deliberately planned, but I wonder if just because later in the issue they have an article about what is it, a TV network scheduler.
Yes, the very last article. Yeah,
incredible map of the week's programming. But I wonder if in that, related to that, if the saturation coverage of the moon was also relatively new for the medium in the summer of 1969.
I also am surprised that it, I guess it wouldn't be now because 24-hour news coverage, but I wondered if there was any sort of like bidding war of like, we're going to make this an ABC exclusive or like a CBS, or if they all kind of got together like from Go and were like, we'll all get the same moon feed.
Right. Well, I did a little research for this, not a lot because I'm not a huge moon historian. I do, I do think the moon is terrific. And I used to really have a fantasy about going to the moon and then being left alone on the moon for a couple hours. I just think that would be a profound experience. But I don't actually know a lot of history about the moon landing. So I was looking into it, and apparently what happened was the feed that was sent from the lunar module wound up in Australia. And then the TV feed that people watched around the world was actually a camera that was trained on the monitor in Australia. So they were watching footage of a feed, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is one reason that the footage is so famous. It just has this kind of, I think part of the magic or what's so evocative about the footage is it feels really far away when you're watching, it just feels like an event that was taking place on the moon because it's a little bleary and grainy and black and white. It's just, it's so evocative. So I think what happened was everyone had access to that footage as it came into Australia.
Yeah, it's real dupey. It looks like a third generation.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It looks like Faces, you're watching a Faces of Death that your older brother dubbed from your cousin because they were wealthy enough to have a double VCR dupe machine, and now you're watching it, except it's the moon.
It was always a divorced dad with a satellite dish who had those dupe machines.
Yeah.
So before we get to Sunday, then what would you have watched on Saturday? Would you have gone Hogan's Heroes?
I'm looking at, there's not much here on Saturday in the 8 to 10 block. I couldn't figure that out. I guess it's because there were less channels back then. 8 o'clock, I could choose between Saratoga Trunk Movie or Hogan's Heroes. I guess I would choose Hogan's Heroes because my paternal grandfather would watch Hogan. He would wake up really early in the morning when we were visiting him in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, and watch Hogan's Heroes at maybe 5:30 in the morning. And I was usually the first person up back then. So I would come downstairs into the kitchen and sit with my papa as he watched Hogan's Heroes. So I guess I would choose Hogan's Heroes for nostalgia's sake.
Was he a World War II vet?
No, he was a World War I vet.
Really?
Yep.
And he was like, "This is hilarious." It didn't bother him.
I mean, it's as we as a culture discuss problematic content and reassess historical things, Hogan's Heroes is. I can't imagine there's going to be a big budget remake of Hogan's Heroes like there was the Wild Wild West, but maybe there will be. Maybe there'll be some super ironic spin.
I think there was one actually.
Really?
There was McHale's Navy, and I think they did a Hogan's Heroes movie. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they did. But imagine if they rebooted it now, it would be set in 2001 or it'd be set in the Iraq War.
Yeah, right. It would be a Guantanamo prison camp comedy.
Which would be hilarious.
Yeah.
We'd need to find another pervert with a murderous best friend to star in it.
Mm-hmm.
But man, yeah, that show, even as a kid, I would just be like, this seems wrong.
I don't remember ever at the time thinking it was wrong. It was just one of those things where years later it was like, wait a minute, what was that show about?
I think it was just seeing people dressed as Nazis, right. Instantly I was like, is that okay? Regardless of content, I was like, I don't know. So yeah, that is kind of the only thing on. And then you have a bikini movie.
Well, I mean, that's counter programming. That's very savvy counter programming to Miss Universe, which starts at 9, which is the main event on Saturday night. So I would probably watch honestly, I would watch the 1969 Miss Universe pageant tonight if it's on YouTube or something. I'm sure that's really interesting and cheesy and fun.
Those are always really fun and weird. They're a bit like the Univision Song Contest. If they were like, let's do this without the music. And there's this beach party movie's Bikini Beach, and I do like this one because Don Rickles is in it.
Oh, okay.
He's in it as a character named Big Drag.
He's one of the most famous people I've ever seen at a restaurant.
Oh, really? What was the restaurant?
I was in Los Angeles maybe 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and I was having dinner with my literary agent and my publisher, and I was touring to promote a little indie press collection of left-wing political cartoons, but because we were dining out on my agent's dime, we went to a super fancy restaurant in Beverly Hills, and as we walked in, Don Rickles was seated at a foretop, and it was one of the first times in my life I had ever seen a truly iconic, famous person.
Were you kind of taken aback, or was it just like, oh my God?
No, I played it cool. I didn't want people to think I was some yokel stumbling into high society and didn't know my place. I didn't acknowledge him. Probably drove him crazy. But
because why isn't that guy asking for my autograph? What this hockey puck?
Exactly.
Were you into like punk rock and some of the sort of 80s sort of mashup, sort of subversive cartoon stuff growing up?
In the 80s, we were very much into punk rock. The Minutemen has always been my favorite band and had a real big impact on how I saw the world, I guess, politically and also aesthetically. And the clip art cartoons that I used to make were kind of very deliberately modeled on like Minutemen songs, just like really brief and succinct and make your point and get out. My friends and I were really into the SST Records catalog. A lot of that has not aged well.
No.
Speaking of things I don't need to revisit, we bought a lot of bad records just because they were on SST.
Oh, the production values. Anytime I see Spot produce something, I'm like,
oh, fuck. Oh, okay. You want to talk about, Okay, I'm closing out this TV guide file so that we can really focus on legendary SST Records producer Spot.
Yeah.
So Spot, for those of you who don't know, produced a lot of the SST records, including The Punchline, the Minutemen's debut EP, which is an incredible, terrific record. I think it's maybe 18 minutes long. It's so... I mean, I can't hate on the production now because I can't separate out the muddiness of it,
right?
And from just how incredible it was to hear that for the first time. But I think Spot also produced Damaged, right?
Yes.
Which is my favorite Black Flag record.
Same. And the Husker Du record, some of them.
Right. And the Damaged record is one where I'm like, I could really stand to hear this remixed and remastered.
Yeah.
I think on this record, it would be a big step up. Because the second side of Damaged is incredible.
Yeah.
And Spot just had this, I don't know if he had stuff stuck in his ears or what, but the stuff was just muddy. Everything is just so sludgy.
Mud. And yeah, so what SST did, they had an in-house producer so that they could just pump out these records like in a day.
Yeah.
So that's why he did everything. And yeah, there's so many amazing bands on SST at that time and records that you're just like, these are great demos for what would be the greatest record of all time.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's a good way to think about it. They do, a lot of them sound like demos, partly because, they're not playing to click tracks, or
right.
They're not like, yeah. But that's part of its appeal when you're young and you want to hear something that's not new wave music, just the noisiness of it and the sloppiness of it. But it gets a little muddy. Yeah.
It also is, and I apologize to my listeners because you do get punk rock talk sometimes on this show and tangents, but the bands on SST all were so, for the most part, incredibly different. It's weird for them all to have the same production sound.
Yeah.
Like the Minutemen should not sound like Black Flag.
Right.
Sound wise.
Right.
But yeah, to your point of people who, I assume my listeners know the Minutemen, but that sort of cheeky subversiveness of things like, political song from Michael Jackson to sing, or that sort of thing is it's not quite irony. It's like I feel like that we only got that at the time where it was sort of this recycling of prior culture without being super snarky.
I think one of the great things about the Minutemen is that, and they made this explicit in the liner notes to Double Nickels on the Dime, their masterpiece, which is they had an unironic love and did cover versions of songs by Van Halen, Creedence Clearwater Revival. I mean, they just liked all kinds of music, and not ironically, like there was no arched eyebrow about it as far as I could tell. And as someone who's always been a total culture snob, I really kind of like admire just the open-heartedness of that attitude. It's like, we think Van Halen is a good band, and we think Creedence Clearwater Revival is a good band. And Greg Ginn of Black Flag was like a total Deadhead. He was really Grateful Dead. I mean, that is a direct influence on some of the worst Black Flag records ever made. Just like the meandering, interminable noodling of sludgy noodling that just goes on forever and ever.
The ones where they go, Henry, how about you do one side just talking and I'll do one side of just garbage music.
We're gonna draw a line down the middle of the bed. This is the side you sleep on, and this is the side I sleep on.
It's a musical McDLT.
Yeah. But yeah, SST, but at the time this was, the early days of the American underground. There weren't a lot of labels. And I think SST, to its credit, was like, yeah, that sounds interesting. We'll put that out too. You know?
Oh yeah. Meat Puppets, like just even Sonic Youth's early stuff was there. But we started getting this 80s sort of aesthetic where looking at stuff like the moon landing, looking at Reagan, pre-President Reagan, we were getting stuff like Night Flight, which I don't know if you watched, but
I mean, if we're really going to do a deep dive here, it was Night Flight was incredibly important to me creatively and to my friends. Night Flight, do you want to explain Night Flight? You're the
so Night Flight USA Network, basically on Friday and Saturday nights, pre-USA Up All Night, which we will remember, just let this guy named Stuart Shapiro do an overnight program. It was like 8 to 10 hours of movies, sometimes little news segments, stand up, old promotional clips, school movies. It was just a weird mashup of anything, basically anything you could get cheap, which is kind of the bottom line on it. But as a result, we would get like New Wave Theater episodes or Church of the Subgenius or Another State of Mind. It was just, you never knew.
So the episode of Night Flight that was the kind of a pivot point in my life was there was I didn't have cable growing up. So let's just put that out on the table. I had the smallest TV among any of my friends. TV was just not a big part of my parents' home life. I was always embarrassed by the small size of our TV in the den. But when I would go over to my friend Aaron's house, Aaron's dad had a nice big TV and he had cable. And we would have sleepovers and watch Night Flight. And there was one episode of Night Flight that focused on a San Francisco experimental music group called The Residents.
Yes, I know.
Just showed a bunch of Residents videos. And it was one of those moments. You only get so many in your life. And it's a terrific feeling where you're like, oh, I didn't know this was allowed. This is music. Like, and then, within a month, Aaron and I were like, oh, if that's all you have to do to be in a band, like we're in a band now. We started recording music with our friends. And what happened was, Aaron at the time had a disposable income because he was working at Burger King after school. I think literally the next week he came over to my house and he had bought like 12 Residents LPs. we just went all in on the Residents. So there was an issue of Spin magazine at the grocery store that had an article about the Residents. I bought that issue of Spin magazine. It was the 1-year anniversary of Spin magazine with David Lee Roth on the cover. I remember it because I still hold on to it because it's such a dear part of my upbringing. And within that issue of Spin magazine, they had a multi-page memorial to Dee Boone, the guitarist and singer of the Minutemen. This was the first issue that came out after Dee Boone died tragically in December of 1985.
In a car accident.
I bought the magazine for the Residents, but then I read about this other band called the Minutemen, and it had all these photos of them like playing in basements and stuff. It was just like not what I thought a punk rock band looked like. So then we went down this Minutemen rabbit hole. And it was it was just a great moment. It's like it's just when the roof opens up and you realize, oh, you can do whatever you want because, and the Minutemen talk about this very explicitly in their music, but at the time in the 80s, in that era, a lot of the music on the radio was either holdover arena rock or new wave synthesizer music, which I am totally into and totally loved. Like I had my Howard Jones tapes, I had my Tears for Fears tapes. I was still into all that stuff, but hearing the Residents and the Minutemen, like that's a pretty fair distance to go from like Thomas Dolby to the Minutemen, where some the songs are like 45 seconds long and they sound like they were recorded in mud, like they, but feel like a whole song somehow still. Yeah, no, it's incredible. I mean, Night Flight, that was it, man. I mean, I remember that night. I remember seeing the Residents' weird black and white movies where they're dressed in newspapers that look like Klan hoods, stop motion animation, shooting lasers at each other's, Hello Skinny, all these it was just like so exhilarating and yeah. And it's funny how these things that changed our lives that we stumbled on television, usually, mine was an episode of The Young Ones that MTV was airing with The Damned on it, or Night Flight, which I watched all the time. It really did boil down to what's cheap, and the Residents, who were an experimental weird ass 70s band, but were all into, multi format art. So they were shooting films and stuff just like Devo was, right? Now has like a body of footage that they could just kind of throw on. And so we get to see it. And it does, it puts you on a path that you wouldn't have been on otherwise. I mean, I remember I remember being so excited going to the dentist's office and leafing through an issue of People magazine. There was a double-page spread about the residents. I was like, the Cultural Revolution has begun. The residents are going to take over American pop culture. They're probably going to do the Super Bowl halftime show. But I think they just had that moment. Maybe someone in People magazine saw them on Night Flight and was like, "Oh, this is weird. They wear tuxedos and have huge eyeballs.
Eyeball heads." It always reminded me.
Let's put them in People magazine.
People will like this spread. There was a Ghost Rider villain in the 70s who was like a biker, and he had a full helmet head, but it was a big eyeball like the residents.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, this all right. Yeah, we get this here. So it is that sort of, you don't know what you're going to see. And, when I look at even back in this 1969 issue here, there's so many variety shows that, I mean, it's not quite Night Flight level, but when you look at for literally the variety of some of the people on these things, there are some pretty subversive like comedians or people like Brother Theodore or just like weird stuff on a regular variety show that week. And in my old man talk, one of the things I miss now, since we can watch whatever we want whenever we want, is that stumbling on something you didn't know you liked because you kind of only watch stuff you already know you want to see.
I wonder about that sometime. I'm not sure I agree with that because, I go back and forth. I mean, on the one hand, you have the experience that you and I grew up with, which is just watching USA Night Flight and just not knowing what you're going to see. But that has been curated to some extent.
Sure.
Right? The programmer had a sensibility, right? And obviously it was a sensibility that was exciting to us because, I don't know, we probably also saw ourselves as subversive young people who wanted to have an open mind or something. Now, the contemporary version of that, I guess, is stumbling across some new TikTok person who's just hilarious and has a style of comedy that you've never seen before, right? And that happens to me a lot. And I do think that a lot of those streaming platforms, I'm not talking about like Netflix or
right.
Hulu where they have an algorithm that just like chokes the life out of you.
Right.
But I do think that going down YouTube rabbit holes, if it doesn't turn you into a white supremacist, sometimes you can have a good evening and wind up far away from where you started watching something that you'd never heard about before. I feel like it can still happen. I don't know.
Yeah. I wonder for younger people, if they have similar experiences like that we had, those sort of overnight everything has changed kind of experiences.
I think they do. I mean, I think that's the nature of being a teenager.
Yeah, I wonder if younger people still have those experiences.
I don't know any young people.
Neither do I.
Right.
And I don't know how to ask them without seeming like a creep.
Right.
So, maybe they can write in. So Saturday night as you said, there's not a lot on. As part of this, I think it could be they're just like, the fucking moon landing's on tomorrow. Don't even try.
Everybody needs to rest. Get your rest, hydrate, because we're gonna be going hard tomorrow.
There is a thing on at 10:30 that just sounds amazing though. I don't ever want to watch it, but just the concept of it sounds great. It's on Channel 10. It's a special called The Fishing Rodeo. And it says taped highlights of the 37th annual deep sea fishing rodeo. What the hell is a fishing rodeo?
It's probably just captive, shooting fish in a barrel, except catching them.
I'm picturing guys with lassos catching like bluefish.
Oh, you really think they're actually getting them with ropes?
Yeah, or like riding a dolphin or something.
Oh, right. On the back of a dolphin. They're getting bucked by a dolphin while they're trying to lasso a fish.
I get it. Would it be a dolphin? I don't know what fish it would be. Like, what's the sea equivalent of a bull?
Dolphin is good.
I guess dolphin is what it would be. Yeah. So I'm just curious about a fishing rodeo and that they had 37 previous ones to that. And if that still goes on.
Where is this? 10:30 at night on Saturday?
Yeah, it's on page A12. July 19th. It's 11 o'clock at night. I'm sorry.
11. Okay.
It's right after the double feature of The Mad Magician and The Return of the Vampire.
Oh yeah, I see that. Yep.
It's fishing rodeo.
11 o'clock. It's late.
Yeah, I mean, all those fish rodeo heads, they gotta stay up late on a Saturday night at 11. That's what they're watching.
And at 11:45 p.m. you have the sheriff's report.
Yeah,
and then they turn it off, and then they just turn off they fucking just stop showing television.
It's just over.
I love it.
It's
Done.
over. It's just over.
They show a patriotic. I mean, if it's like when they signed off when I was a kid, they show the American flag and they show an F-14 and they have the instrumental version of the national anthem, and then it's just static.
Have you ever seen the CNN End of the World video?
No, I don't know what that is.
So Ted Turner was so convinced that we were going to die in like a nuclear holocaust
that he made like a
when
video
it's
package. For
play this, and it's basically like the world signing off. And someone leaked it recently, like in the last 5 years, and it's up on YouTube. But it basically is like the Super Bowl of TV sign-offs with we had a good run, and it's completely sincere and insane.
Wow.
It's fantastic. So TV's just off at that time. So Sunday, I'm imagining the big night, you're all in for the moon landing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think I would kick myself if I didn't tune into the moon landing. Although, before we did this podcast, I was talking to my parents and I asked them, do you remember watching the moon landing? And my dad said he didn't have a TV. My mom said she probably watched it, but she doesn't remember watching it, which kind of surprised me. Although it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So
this television behind me, which the listeners can't see, but is an old vintage TV. I was driving and some people were wheeling it out to the garbage. And I was like, are you throwing that out? And they're like, yeah, you want it? We watched the moon landing on it.
Oh, see, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's of that era. That's great. Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I want it.
That's really cool.
So some people did watch it, although I'm a big Elvis fan, and I have hours and hours of this raw footage from a documentary that never came out. And there's footage of him in the back of a limousine on July 21st, 1969. And all the Memphis Mafia guys are talking about the moon landing. And then they go like how crazy it was. And they go, hey, E, what'd you think of that moon landing? And Elvis goes, oh man, I didn't see it. I was buried in a beaver.
Wow.
And they're like, oh, you can't say that, E. So point being, some people didn't watch it.
I mean, I guess I understand it. Why wouldn't people watch the moon landing? Number one reason, I bet, anxiety. What if something goes wrong?
That's true.
I don't want to watch grainy black and white footage of Neil Armstrong's head imploding as soon as he gets on the moon and they realize they calculated the gravity all wrong. It was on kind of late. I think it was on late at night. People didn't stay up. People had work in the morning. Maybe people were told, actually, it's not going to be in Panavision and it's actually not going to look that good. And they said, well, we hold our television to a higher standard. I'm not going to watch a black and white thing.
I'll wait till we get the footage.
Right. And then for some people, it's the Gil Scott-Heron thing. Why do I need to watch Whitey on the moon? Why did we spend all this money on this patriotic boondoggle to go to a rock in space and then fly home after 8 hours or whatever it was?
You think there were people who were like, this is stupid?
Yo, absolutely. Listen, if we ever go to Mars someday, I'm not going to fucking stay up and watch us land on Mars. I'm totally opposed to landing on Mars and colonizing Mars. My protest will be to not watch that.
I do like that some counter programming, someone has decided to air Dr. Strangelove at the same time as the moon landing.
See, that was a cynic probably.
Which is kind of great. But yeah, and I wonder if there were the people who thought it was faked then.
There's no way that we've gone to the moon. So why would I buy into this obvious fiction and watch Stanley Kubrick's little stage play?
Yeah, I wonder if that was because I in reading this issue and then I read some contemporary stuff and I couldn't find any examples of people being like, this is fake. So I'm wondering when that started bubbling up.
Right, yeah.
Because that just is bonkers. And I've watched this moon landing stuff. So, like I said, I watched this moon landing stuff you kids like. And
right.
it isn't that thrilling now. And I wonder if it wasn't then because the idea was sort of better than the execution, maybe?
Well, it's one of the, it's almost like the moon landing is a lot like certain pieces of conceptual art the pleasure and the thrill is thinking about it rather than actually experiencing it, right?
Right.
But when I was looking at photos of people gathering in Central Park or wherever to watch it on huge screens as it happened at night, I think the fun of it isn't that all of a sudden you're just getting this incredible footage of this landscape that's blowing your mind because it has purple waterfalls and all these wonderful trees and flowers you've never seen before. It's more like, I can't believe I'm sitting here watching some dudes fucking walk on the moon right now.
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
Yeah. It seems like something that needs to be a communal experience. Like you're watching it with people. Right. So that makes sense why some people might not remember it if they were like watching it alone. Probably seems somewhat underwhelming with a big group
maybe
of people.
That's true.
Maybe it's exciting. And it might be an East Coast, West Coast thing because it was on later. I wonder if West Coast people saw it at like a more reasonable hour.
Yeah, that's true. Right. It's like if the Oscars started it at 8:00 Eastern.
The New York
I guess
people.
they do, right? Because they start at 5 p.m. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
I bet the time zones had something to do with how many people watched it and where they watched it.
Us on the cynical East Coast were like, hey, you have fun with your little moon party, West Coast people. So would you watch Monday, still in the afterglow of 31 hours of moon coverage?
Right. So I think it was Monday where something. Oh, wait, no. There's one movie somewhere during this week that I was very excited to see, but I guess it's not Monday evening. Let me double check.
Monday's rough, I will say.
Yeah, I mean, Outcasts. I've never heard of Outcasts, but it says it's about bounty hunters. I guess I'll try Outcasts.
Yeah, because your other option's Mayberry RFD, which nobody likes.
Right. And then I guess I would watch Dick Cavett. I've never seen an episode of Dick Cavett. I've only seen little clips. I think it would be fun to watch that show.
That show's fun. They've put up like all the episodes on YouTube in the last couple of years, and you kind of cherry pick who the guests are, but there's some amazing conversations on that show. I highly recommend the Robert Mitchum episode. That's a very good one.
Oh, really? The
really
novelist?
good. The actor.
Oh, the actor, right? Yeah. From Cape Fear.
Yep. What a fascinating guy. Like he worked at Lockheed Martin and he was a hobo on the railroad. Like it's just this crazy stories. That's kind of the best of what that show is.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, he was, I can't believe how long Dick Cavett was doing shows for. I mean, we're talking 40 years on different stations.
Amazing.
Which is kind of cool. So Monday's a bit of a letdown. Again, I wonder if that is also because they're like, look, everyone stayed up late watching the moon.
Yeah.
Don't bother with anything. What are we going to put on?
Don't push them. They're tired.
So Tuesday, they're like, okay, we can get back into some special programming now.
Let's get back to Earth.
And
Earth
they do
still
that.
Has a lot of great things to offer.
The All-Star Game is on that night. 7:00 it starts, but it's the 40th annual All-Star Game.
It's a big week. This was a big week.
It is July, I guess, and since that, I mean, obviously the moon landing wasn't made for wasn't scheduled for TV, but they do a lot of stunt programming over the summer because everything else is in reruns. So you do get a lot of those sort of big event things.
Oh, right. Yeah, that makes sense. Liberace variety. I've never seen. God, there were a lot of variety shows, huh?
Every night there's at least one.
Oh man.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
And they're weird too. Like it is. My favorite thing is just the mixture of people that are on them because it's people that sort of never would interact with each other otherwise.
Like this one says, so we have Eva Gabor, Frankie Vaughan, the Sandpipers, and Scottish singer Moira Anderson. Eva tells how she discovered Shakespeare. Liberace plays a honky-tonk medley with Frankie and Eva. And in a concert spot, the theme from Exodus. And then there's dancers in the Jack Parnell Orchestra. I mean, that's showbiz right there.
Yeah.
I don't think we have that flavor on TV anymore.
I don't know if there's enough I don't know if there are the personalities that could pull it off.
We just don't have enough talent left in America.
It's true. Well, I mean,
variety show now is just like Jimmy Fallon playing a slide whistle with some Instagram model.
Pretty much. It's like, I mean, you had these people who came from like vaudeville, so they could do everything.
Yeah, right. Total entertainment. Yeah.
But also we had these I mean, obviously everything's sort of niche now, but there were people who like, if you'd never seen or heard Liberace, you still knew who Liberace was. Because they were just, that was that level of fame you can't attain.
It was more,
anymore.
monoculture.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So I wonder if that was part of it too. And that's up against NYPD, not the blue version.
Right. This is pre-blue version.
But this has Bill Macy in it, who's an amazing actor from Boston here. William Hickey is in this episode. This is like a murderer's row of old men character actors in this episode of NYPD.
Man, yeah.
Which is
really
great.
Looking at the TV guide, like looking at the actual scans of the. Can you imagine being someone in the layout department of the TV guide? I mean, were they laying this out on a computer? They must have been, right? This must have been.
This is cut and paste.
There's no way. There's so many tiny little elements here.
And
I think it would drive me crazy.
There was a regional variant in every part of the country.
Yeah.
So there were local ads, there was national ads. You had there were different. So what I've learned since doing this show, because I've learned like way more about TV Guide than I ever thought I would, is they had sort of siloed departments. So sometimes you'll see in a TV Guide, there'll be an ad for a show, and then the listing will be a totally different episode of that show, or it'll be like scheduled. So they would come in at different times and be done by different departments. So like the national ad section, like they'd kind of get like a paste up already, just like throw in your stuff here kind of thing. But yeah, this was all done by hand.
It's incredible.
Which is nuts.
I can't wait for AMC to make a prestige drama about the glory days of working at TV Guide magazine
in Philly in like the 1970s.
Mad Men style show about putting together each week's issue of TV Guide, and like
I'd watch it. There's also someone who worked there at the Philly office sent me. So every week they would have a giant, like nice mounted and framed version of the cover that would go behind the receptionist, but it'd be the cover without any of the logo or, like just the photo kind of thing.
Wow. Uh-huh.
And so someone sent me like 100 of those because they would be up for a week and then they get rid of them. They kept them all. So I have a ton of them, and they're big. They're I don't know.
They're like poster sized.
Yeah. Poster sized. And some of them are really cool because they're like commissioned art. There's like Jack Davis drawings or like,
wait, these are the originals or these are the photos?
Prints. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay.
But they're still like nice prints.
Did he send them flat or rolled?
Flat.
Yeah,
because they're mounted on cardboard.
That's incredible.
But I'm like, that was someone's job just to like make sure they got that thing every week, so they could, just weird
every week.
Like
those covers added up, 52 a year.
There's also a great ad in here on A35 before we get to Wednesday for, speaking of the swinging 60s, for this is a painkiller for women in their periodic pain. And discomfort, and this is the most made up sounding name for a product I've ever seen. Fem-Pain.
It almost sounds like an SST band.
It does. Who cares what day it is? Fem-Pain. That also sounds like an SST band album title.
And go down to the bottom and look at the name of the company.
SSS.
So close.
Oh, man.
So close.
I think we're going to let the cat out of the bag by telling everyone we do this, but I bet you we could convincingly make a lost SST record out of this ad and make people think it was a real thing that just was like really, they only did a few copies of.
Listed on Discogs for $25,000.
Yes. 12 tablets. You just make that say 12 songs. This is great. Fem-Pain. Like, what a patronizing ridiculous name,
right?
Like, yeah, take that Fem-Pain, lady. Wednesday, anything jump out at you?
No, Wednesday is, well, hold on, let me double check. No, I mean, well, it says movie/intrigue. They always list the genre of movie. The Dirty Game, French, German, Italian, and English. I would watch that. That sounds kind of highbrow. That's interesting. 1965,
Robert Ryan is a U.S. intelligence chief. General Bruce is a link to an episodic tale of espionage. I think this was a a TV pilot that did not
An
go.
Italian scientist who perfected a revolutionary rocket fuel is the pawn in a Cold War struggle. Yeah, I would watch that. I'm a huge fan of the French show The Bureau. Have you ever seen The Bureau?
Yes.
I've watched that twice during quarantine, and that's kind of put me on an espionage kick.
This is like, there's two stories in this episode, in this movie. The second one is
three.
Three. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
A French underwater expert tries to prevent a Russian attack on 2 U.S. subs, and an undercover agent escapes from the Russians with information from the CIA. Yeah, this was the height of like gadgetry and intrigue, which fits into the moon landing and all that as well.
And then you got the Beverly Hillbillies.
Right.
That's what's so amazing about this issue. And now something a little closer to home. The Beverly Hillbillies.
It could be a communist plot. The Beverly Hillbillies. I hate that show. It's real bad.
Kennedy was like, we will have a show about misfit transplants to Beverly Hills before the Soviets will, mark my words. And then we'll do that other thing. Go to the moon.
That's that other show. That is the Beverly Hillbillies is the other thing. Also, weirdly, Robert Mitchum movie on called White Witch Doctor from 1953, which I'm sure is culturally horrific.
Right.
But it's rumored that there's gold hidden in the Congo and 2 adventurers must get it. And they join a nurse entering the dangerous Bakuba County. Yeah, I don't know what that is. But yeah, Beverly Hillbillies and a spy show. Couldn't get more different than that. Green Acres is also on. This was sort of the rural night. So Petticoat Junction was on, Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres. Green Acres is amazing.
Is that good?
It's
I haven't watched
really
it.
good.
I remember nothing about it. I think my brother and I used to watch Beverly Hillbillies probably in those same lost late mornings after we would watch Bonanza. I think the Beverly Hillbillies was on, but I don't
makes
remember
sense.
watching Green Acres.
Green Acres is super subversive, really funny. They were always breaking the fourth wall, doing some bizarre, surreal stuff that I can't believe they got away with on TV. Huh. A lot of it's actually very much like The Simpsons. Like Eva Gabor's character can see the credits. But no one else can.
Really?
Yeah. So she's always commenting on them, and she's like, there's that name again. And people are like, what are you talking about? It's just bizarre. There's an episode where Arnold Ziffel the pig gets drafted into Vietnam, and it's like an anti-Vietnam episode. Like I cannot believe the stuff they got away with. And Eddie Albert was a World War II war hero and was like really anti-war and got a ton of just stuff in there that I cannot believe they got away with. And it's a fun show that I rewatch, and it's really funny. It's legitimately funny.
I'm so sick of, I'm glad to hear that because I need something new to watch. I'm so sick of fake prestige Netflix dramas. I've wasted so many hours watching some brooding crime drama over the course of like 6 or 8 episodes on Netflix. And then it ends and I'm like, wait a minute, that wasn't prestige TV.
Yeah. I just feel bad.
It was like, it looked like it and I fell for it, but that was not actually prestige television.
If it looks right and sounds right, they won't notice.
If it's somebody famous walking in a cloudy town wearing some baggy coat so that they look really schlubby and unhappy. I spent the last 24 months of my life, I couldn't click play on those things fast enough. Maybe because one time I watched Broadchurch and I thought all this stuff was Broadchurch and most of it is not.
No, we can't all be David Tennant.
Yeah. Or Olivia Colman.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm over it. I was thinking, earlier this year, I got really into reruns of Maude starring B. Arthur. Maude was a terrific show.
It's great.
And the whatchamacallit, The Saint, the Roger Moore mystery show which I notice is listed here.
Yep. This was the height of it. This is the Ian Oglevie era of The Saint, I believe, who replaced Roger Moore.
Okay.
But he's great. Ian Ogilvie's amazing. Really interesting guy, actually. He went to school with the guy who directed the movie Witchfinder General, which is a really great Vincent Price movie that takes place in the time of Cromwell. And it's like just grim and dark, and Vincent Price is terrifying. He's not hammy at all. And so Ian Oglevie is in that as well. And he's in like 3 of this guy's movies. I can't think of his name, but he died. He died at like 23. He only made like 3 movies. Oh. And Ian Oglevie started acting in his movies. And then when he died, Ian Oglevie became like a mainstream actor. So I don't even know what the equivalent would be. But it's a really weird career path. And there's a famous story of when they're shooting Witchfinder General, and the director keeps telling Vincent Price to like quit being cheesy and stop being hammy, and Vincent Price goes, I've made over 100 films, how many have you made? And then the guy goes, 2 good ones. And then Vincent Price is like, fair enough. And then he gets an amazing performance out of him. But Ian Oglevie literally went almost immediately from that to The Saint.
Huh.
Which is just weird. But yeah, The Saint is super fun. Obviously the Avengers was big this year at 69.
Avengers is a show that I've never watched. My godfather was crazy for the Avengers, but I've never watched it.
It's fun. It's stupid. Have you ever seen like the Dr. Phibes movies?
I don't know what that is.
So they were these horror movies of Vincent Price take place in the 20s. They're very fun, but the Avengers was same people made those as the Avengers.
Oh, okay.
It's almost like a Batman 66 type show. But less, like, more subtle.
Right.
Which isn't saying that much, but worth watching. Yeah, in lockdown I didn't want to watch that heavy stuff. Like I've been going back to like shows like Green Acres and that sort of thing because I just want to like.
So how do you watch them? Do you you can't find? I mean, Netflix feels like history for Netflix is like 6 months ago, and anything older than 2 years ago is lost forever. So how do you watch something like Green Acres?
So there's Pluto TV, which is an app, and it's basically like an old cable station. So you download it and it's 200 channels, and the channels are specific. So like there's a channel that all it shows is Unsolved Mysteries. There's one that just shows Baywatch. There's one that just shows shows from the 50s. Like, and it's actually Night Flight has a channel on it. So they show old night flights. So that's Pluto. There's one called Tubi.
How much is that? Like $1,000 a month? You're getting 500 channels?
Free. Completely free.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Why didn't anyone talk about this?
I don't know. It's all old
run
stuff.
By the Library of Congress or something? Why
no, it's this. There are ads on some of the channels, and they're like ads when you're scrolling through. But it's sort of that thing we were talking about at the very beginning here, in that it's all shows that obviously Netflix isn't trying to buy Green Acres reruns. So this channel is like, hey, well, there's all this content, we can just get it.
Oh my God. And I can watch this on my Apple TV.
Yep. And Night Flight channel is on Apple TV. The Roku channel is great. There's a ton of old shows on that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, mostly 80s stuff, but a lot of the old shows. Green Acres is on all of them. Barney Miller's another show that I've been rewatching. That's on most of the.
I rewatched some Barney Miller this summer. It was really interesting. I watched the one where the episode after what's his name had died.
Oh, Jack Sue, the tribute episode.
Yeah. It was really interesting.
Yeah,
it was really heartfelt, and it got into like, his like Asian stereotyping and stuff. Like it was really interesting.
There's a great documentary called, I think it's called You Don't Know Jack, about Jack Sue, and he was in like a Japanese internment camp.
Yeah, totally. And they talk about that in the tribute episode. They talk about him being in. Yeah,
one of the only non-black people signed to Motown.
Oh, really?
He was in Flower Drum Song on Broadway, and then he got signed to Motown and recorded, I think, a whole album.
How do you know so much stuff about all this?
I don't know, man. This stuff is interesting to me, so I will read up on it, but but like I can't memorize stuff. If it's interesting, I need to know more, and then it just stays there.
I know what you mean.
But like as a kid, I spent so much time at the library. I'd read every book on horror movies or like whatever. I'd go through. Right, I was the microfiche kid,
Oh, right. Do you have the cult movies books by?
Oh yeah,
Danny Peary? Yeah.
Yep, Danny Peary. Those
were a huge thing in our youth as we were opening our minds. Psychotronic Guide to Film.
Yep, Michael J. Whedon.
Yep.
Yeah, I have my Psychotronic Guide back here somewhere, and yeah, pre-internet, those things were like gold. Just
Yeah,
absolute
totally.
gold.
Yeah.
And a lot of those.
I mean, I still have my cult movies books, and that cult movie volume 1, that first one, I think is like split down the middle.
Oh, yeah.
It's in 2 separate pieces because we would just tear that up, reading about everything.
I will still pull that out to this day. I actually have them on my Kindle as well. Like those are all in e-readers now too, those cult movies books, but I still have my physical copy and Psychotronic. And, when I can't think of something to watch, I'll just randomly flip. And then I've very rarely not been able to find the thing streaming on something, which is kind of like a utopia.
Right. The movie I want to watch that I read about in cult movies that I've never seen, and now I'm afraid to see it because I'm worried it won't live up to my 14 or 13-year-old imagination of what it must have been like, is El Topo.
El Topo is fucked up.
I know. I've never seen, I've seen a lot of the cult movies now thanks to that book. But El Topo always just felt like the one where it's like, you better be in your 40s before you
can't handle this movie.
Right. Before you take a hit of this El Topo we got here.
Have you seen any Jodorowsky? Like, did you see Holy Mountain or Santa Sangre or his other movies at all?
I've never seen it. The only thing I've seen is the documentary about the version of
the Dune
he wanted to make. Right.
So, I mean, El Topo's probably this is a weird thing to say, his most accessible film.
Right. I'll start with that. That's good. I like accessible stuff.
Actually, the great place to see it is, once COVID's over, El Topo is really one of those midnight movies that is just so much better seeing it in a theater with a group of people.
Yeah, right.
And not in like a Rocky Horror way, in like a we all just went through some shit way, like a
Yeah. I miss that. No, I hope that. I mean, it would be great if once people started coming back to movie theaters, the programmers were like, you know what? We're going to show you some fucking big screen movies now. You waited all year. We're not going to show you fucking
Avengers,
Superman versus Godzilla. We're going to show you some heavy shit on film stock from 1966 or whatever. That would be incredible.
Well, the Coolidge Corner Theater here that Hodgman used to work at, actually, in Brookline.
Yeah, I saw a lot of movies at Coolidge Corner back in the day.
They show El Topo at least once a year.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
so right. we should all get a group of people next time.
Yeah, I'd be into that.
See it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that movie is so unlike the rest of the movies in that cult movies book, in that it's not fun, but you're glad you saw it.
Right.
Actually, I think the reason I picked up that book is he covers Terror of Tiny Town, which was on Night Flight constantly.
Oh,
which was that Western with all little people.
Yep.
That was always on Night Flight. And he wrote about it in that cult movies book. I loved those books. I've actually talked to Danny Peary. He's still around.
Really?
And he's still writing about movies. He's done a few other books, and just an interesting guy. But they were the only books on those movies. You couldn't find anything else about them.
Yeah, no, they were a great resource. It was a great idea for a book. And I loved how some of the essays he wrote were very personal and were about his experience of the film. And then others of them were just much more matter of fact. It was very idiosyncratic. It was very much a product of his personality and his interests. And if he hated a movie, he would tell you, like, this movie sucks. But if he had, fond memories of a movie, he would talk about that and what it was like seeing the movie for the first time. They're good little essays.
And he would have to cover too, because he'd be like, look, this one's one of the cult movies, so I gotta talk about it. But I don't really like it. Which was pretty amazing. He did a horror movies book too. That's very good.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's got a whole bunch of writing out. A lot of it was out of print, but he made sure all of his books are like available as ebooks now.
That's really cool.
So you can kind of download all of them. Thursday, anything pop out at you?
So Thursday, I guess I'll watch Tom Jones because I just have to keep watching all my variety shows.
This is a pretty good one. The Bee Gees, Sergio Mendes, Lulu, Tim Conway, Tom Jones spoofs the Lone Ranger.
I think Thursday is not. No, nothing's jumping out for me.
The Prisoner is on.
Okay, so The Prisoner is another one of those shows that I know all about it through osmosis. I don't think I've ever seen an entire episode. And maybe that's probably what I should have been putting in my eyes over the past 12 months instead of all this Netflix bullshit. I should have watched The Prisoner because I know it's
good.
Really out there.
It's really great. And did you ever watch Secret Agent Man, the spy show that Patrick McGoohan did before The Prisoner?
No.
It's very much like The Saint, and to the point where they actually offered Patrick McGoohan James Bond before Sean Connery, and McGoohan turned it down.
Huh.
And basically McGoohan is this like subversive, artistic, like Irishman who didn't want to be making sort of a dumbass spy show sort of, and he quit the show. So the show was canceled. And The Prisoner is essentially his essay about why he quit Secret Agent Man.
Whoa.
And so he wrote The Prisoner, he created The Prisoner, and it's about a spy who quits and then gets drugged and wakes up on this island where all these people are trying to find out why he quit. So it's this.
That's what it's about?
That's what it's about. And so
is this going to be on, will I be able to find this on that Pluto app you mentioned?
Yep. Yeah. You can find this streaming for sure. And it's really weird and trippy and about identity and McGoohan is one of those, like Eddie Albert in Green Acres. He's one of my favorite yelling actors. He just gets angry in 6 seconds. But I can't believe he got it on the air, and it was a massive hit. That's the weird thing.
Yeah.
We always,
every generation thinks it's so clever and so savvy and meta. And you watch this old shit. It's like these people are just so much more subversive than what we're patting ourselves on the back for watching.
Totally.
It's like, yeah.
And this week, even like Green Acres and The Prisoner, like they're two shows where they're commenting on the nature of television.
I had a real revelation a couple years ago where I read Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, and I was lolling. I was laughing out loud at some of the stuff I was reading. And the great thing about humor is when humor connects with you, it's so immediate. And it's just right. It's like somebody is standing right beside you, making you laugh. It's a real collapsing of distance, And it was like, I mean, I know Charles Dickens is like a great writer and like he is very influential and he has stories about all these people and his novels have 500 characters. I was like, this guy's really fucking funny. And it wasn't grading him on a curve. Like, like you watch some old black and white thing. And it's like, I beg your pardon, my lady. That's my cigar. And you're like, okay, I get why these idiots thought that was funny. They just went through the Great Depression. They'll laugh at anything. No. It's like, and there's a movie that's coming up in this guide, which is the thing I'm really stoked to talk about that I had the same reaction to, where it's like, holy shit, this is like totally funny.
Yeah.
Not in a patronizing way. Like I wasn't thinking like, oh, this is pretty funny for Charles Dickens. It was like, no, this is funny. This is really, really funny. It's such a great feeling to have that.
Oh, yeah. And the weirdest thing about Charles Dickens is if people look at that as sort of highbrow now, that was literally written for like the plebs. It was serialized.
Totally, yeah. It was not prestige. It was not prestige content.
It was basically like a sitcom for the time,
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's funny, yeah, when we look back at those things that were mass pop culture now as sort of a highbrow thing is kind of hilarious. But those things do stand out when they're not. There's a sincerity. I think it goes back to the Minutemen. I think when someone's creating something in a sincere way, it becomes somewhat timeless usually. When they're not trying to be part of a movement or part of the time.
But wasn't Dickens also just like mercenary about it? Like he was writing for money, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. He was just a total workaday writer in a way, right?
Yeah. But just like Ray Bradbury too, I mean, he got paid by the word and would rent, but they were like, I just want to do some good stuff though, but they weren't like, I'm creating timeless art,
Maybe the Minutemen were paid by the song and that's why each song is 30 seconds long.
It might have been
like 90 tracks on a double LP. I mean, SST just paid him by the song title.
Have you read either of the John Doe LA Punk books from the last couple of years?
No, I never got into X for some reason. I don't know why. Are they good?
I like Exene Cervenka's voice. I can't deal with sometimes, but the books, he basically edited them and each chapter is written by a different person from that scene. So Watt writes a chapter, and then the audio version, that person reads their own chapter. And Mike Watts is just amazing. It's
Yeah,
so
I'm sure.
good.
I'm sure.
He gets really choked up, like it's him meeting D Boone when they were kids, and it's just like his chapter is
The
a whole
origin
book
story.
unto itself. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
it's great, and all his weird lingo. He's talking about Husker Du, and he's like, I didn't know, man, that White Castle, those burgers were tiny. And we went with Husker Du, and they're ordering 40, 50 burgers. And I'm like, D Boone can't eat 40, 50 burgers, and he's wide. I'm like, he's like, I didn't know. It's like just he tells a story where, and this goes to their sincerity. The first time he drove into Hollywood, he was driving down Sunset Boulevard, and it was all gay hustlers on Sunset Boulevard at the time. Like,
Yeah, right.
guys picking stuff up. And Mike Watt literally thought, man, these guys should all pool their money, rent a bus or something. They all look like they're going to the same place. And he said that to someone, and they were like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And then he's like, oh, geez. But I'm like, those are my people. So final night of the week, I assume this is the night that the movie is on.
Here it is, 8:00 on Channel 3. Have you ever seen this movie?
Let's see, Channel 3, Hall of the Conquering Hero.
Hail the Conquering
Hail
Hero.
the Conquering Hero. 1944, an elaborate homecoming is planned for the returning hero who has actually been discharged because of hay fever. This is a comedy.
This is a Preston Sturges movie.
I've not seen this.
And if you've never seen a Preston Sturges movie, I had a great experience years ago. I was home in Chapel Hill one spring, and there was still a great video store called VisArt Video. It's just a huge selection of movies and stuff. And I can't remember why, but I started watching Preston Sturges movies. And these Preston Sturges was a satirical movie maker. He made Hail the Conquering Hero. He made Miracle at Morgan's Creek. He made Sullivan's Travels. He made he had a hot streak that is like unmatched. He made like 7 immortal comedies in like 9 years. Had one of those careers where he just had a period of just firing on all cylinders, you know? And I watched Hail the Conquering Hero. This movie is so fucking funny and subversive. And it's that feeling where you're like, was this made yesterday?
Yeah.
Because I watched it. I guess the Iraq War was still going on. I think Bush was still in office. And it's just like, it's one of those things like you're talking about with Green Acres. Like, I can't believe they let this go out into movie theaters
During the war. This is 1944.
Yeah, it's like
the war's not even over.
This is total anti-American propaganda. I can't believe we're allowed to watch this. I mean, It's not total anti-American propaganda. It's like, you know, his movies are like very cutting and acerbic, but you know, there's a heart. And one of the great things about Preston Sturges that you'll realize if you watch his movies is he's like Christopher Guest. He had his players. He just kept using the same crew, you know, over and over again in his movies. So people turn up in all different characters.
Eddie Bracken's in this one.
There's one character in this movie, Hail the Conquering Hero. And I can't remember the actor who plays this character, but it is one of the, I was really trying to track down these scenes on YouTube a couple months ago. It is such a specific and weird and funny performance. And it's like it's like a side character. It's not one of the main characters. He's a member of the crew I can't remember if it's the army or whoever is this kid gets discharged for hay fever. It's a mistaken identity. Everybody thinks he's a huge war hero. He comes back to his small town. He's trying to tell the truth, but the army is like, don't blow this. Your town needs this. They need a hero. Don't tell the truth about how you're just a fuck up. And one of the members of this group is so, I don't know how to describe it. It's just one of those performances that just feels like it was filmed tomorrow. It just feels so futuristic and kind of, you know, it's just like, I guess that's why TV and movies and books are so terrific. You know, it's just like people are interesting. And anyway, I can't recommend Hail the Conquering Hero highly enough. And all these Preston Sturges movies are just like, it's just incredible what he got away with. And they're so much fun. They're so funny.
I have
So-
not seen these. I don't know if I've seen a Preston Sturges movie.
You
I
got to
feel
check
like
it
this is a
out.
huge
I would say
hole.
that other than the moon landing, this was definitely the highlight of the week's television programming for this July from 1969.
So we start the week with the most contemporary thing possible. We end the week with a 25-year-old movie from 1944, and they feel like the same week.
Yeah,
It
totally.
doesn't feel any different. So now I am going away from the episode with some homework that rarely happens, but I'm going to watch the Hail the Conquering Hero this weekend.
Yeah, I hope you like it. I
Yeah.
hope you like it, and I hope there's a moment where you're like, oh, I wonder if that's the character that David Rees was talking about. Because when this dude opened his mouth, I was just like spellbound.
I'm gonna have to follow up with you and see if it's the same person.
It's just one of those performances where you're like, what is happening, man? Like, what game is this actor playing? This is so crazy.
Oh man, I'm excited for this now. This is good.
I hope I didn't overhype it.
No, I'm sure you didn't. I love 40s movies as well, so I'm very excited for this. Well, thank you so much for doing this. This has been a great chat.
Thank you. I
And,
appreciate it.
I'm so happy to get stuff to watch for me now.
Well, man, this Pluto app. I know Netflix down the block at Netflix headquarters. I know their ears are burning because I'm about to have a conscious uncoupling with Netflix. I'm so over Netflix. I'm gonna be all Pluto from now on. So thank you for telling me about Pluto.
Oh, baby, I see you in my TV set. Yeah, baby, I see you in my TV set. I cut your head off and put it in my TV set.
There you go. That episode not produced by Spot, so you'll hear that crystal clear and not muddy production of David and I, although I don't know, I produced, I guess is how this, anyway, yeah, go listen to SST Records stuff, everybody, and listen to this show next week because there'll be a brand new episode. And if you have guests you'd like to hear on the show, please let me know who they are and I will attempt to get them on. You can get in touch with me on social media at TV Guidance or at Kenneth W. Reed, REID, or you can email me at ken@icanread.com or tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com. Also, we have our Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/TV Guidance Counselor, and every dollar and penny you give helps me to do this show without losing money, which is a good goal to have. Oh my God. This year is better than last year. That's all I'm just keep telling myself that. Yeah. Anyway, I'll be here next week, so I hope you will too, for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
Grainy black and white footage of Neil Armstrong's head imploding as soon as he gets on the moon, and they realize they calculated the gravity all wrong.